noticeable.
Jam full, and we must sell to make room. Now's the time to buy and save on...
Frederick W. Shandro is a lawyer in Vancouver who specializes in insolvencies and bankruptcies,
That's
correct?
Right. That's correct.
Was appointed by the government, I think it was Heinemann, to look into this vexed problem of who do you trust in the travel business? Or my interpretation of, can you trust anybody, or should you always deal directly through an airline? He looked into the matter of the Travels Agent Act and the financial failure of a number of companies, and he came up with some recommendations. Mr. Shandro, in what kind of horrible state is the travel agency business in BC?
Well, I don't, and I didn't find that it was in a horrible state. I think the conclusions drawn relating to the industry generally were quite favorable. British Columbia is one of 3 provinces in Canada that has travel legislation, and there is mechanism within that legislation to virtually guarantee there will be no consumer loss.
You mean from now on?
No, it's been in effect since 1978, and in fact there has been no consumer loss since that time.
By that you mean that the insurance scheme has been good enough to give people back their money, even though their holidays may have been ruined and they may not have got their accommodation or what they were looking for?
That's correct.
Well, that's a step in the right direction. But there is one specific aspect which you looked into, which I think you call package operators or tour operators. Are they the people with the shaky basis whom one should be leery about?
Well, leery is a strong word. I would say that the tour operator or the wholesaler is in a more hazardous position because they must contract with airlines, hotels, and other tourist facilities far in advance in order to arrange charters and whatnot. In the result, they will take the public's money long in advance of providing the service. Mm-hmm. And if they, through incompetence or fraud or whatever reason, their businesses go under, the public would be in the position of having prepaid their services, and the operator would be out of business. Therein lies the danger, whereas the agent who you're referring to, who merely purchased the ticket, must pay the airline within a very short period of time, so there's a minimum amount of risk.
So broadly speaking, your travel agents are pretty secure, solid people.
Yes, they are.
But if you're not careful, you can finish up with well, you had one celebrated case which you investigated specifically, did you not?
That's correct.
Windmill Holidays, the DBA, the holiday company Boyarsky Tours, Lucky Travels, and Sun Fun Tours, the holiday company.
That's right.
Were these all operated by one group?
There was one individual that was the principal of all those companies, Stephen Milne. And in fact, it was his activities prior to 1978 that inspired in part British Columbia enacting the travel legislation.
Now, what protection do we now get before any of your recommendations are brought into effect on a bad deal on a holiday?
A bad deal. The protection is contained in the Act. There are really 2 mechanisms in the Act that protect the public. One is, in order for an agent to sell travel services in BC, he must be registered. And the second protection in the Act is that every travel agent in BC must contribute a certain percentage of his gross revenue to a fund called the Travel Assurance Fund.
Right.
That Travel Assurance Fund is what I referred to in my report as the last resort between the traveling public and an operator that goes under. And the trick is that the fund be maintained at a sufficient level to cover anticipated failures, and they can be perfectly innocent like all businesses. The travel industry is subject to economy and so on and so forth. But as long as the fund is maintained at the proper level, then it is a virtual guarantee that you will not have the public suffer.
Do you recommend that the fund be increased?
Indeed. As a result of Mr. Milne's last collapse, which is the Windmill Group of companies, there was a call on the fund of about $365,000.
Which was met?
Which was met. Every cent of consumer money has either been paid or approved for payment, but it has, in the result, reduced the value of the fund to a level where I feel if there were 2 or 3 failures in the next short while, that the fund would not be sufficient.
So how much should it go up to?
I've recommended that it be a minimum, I recommend that there be a minimum of $500,000 in the fund by way of a special assessment right away. On the industry, based on the formula in the legislation. The formula of assessment is based on, it's weighted towards the tour operator, because that, as I've explained earlier,
That's a danger area.
It's higher risk. I've recommended that there be an immediate assessment to bring it to $500,000. Thereafter, it be allowed to accumulate to $1 million. And when it reaches $1.5 million, then it stop. And I've also recommended it be reviewed on a periodic basis, because as the economy changes, then I think the value of the fund should be considered as well.
Now, who pays that? The traveling public, I suppose, in the final analysis?
No, it is paid by the tour operators and travel agents.
It becomes the cost of doing business.
I think ultimately it would.
And
be.
it's scaled on the gross volume of
It is based on a percentage of gross value of sales, yes.
There were some funny things which came out of your report about these tours to Reno. What happened to the poor people on the tours to Reno?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't take a trip to Reno, so I can't give you a first-hand account, but the trips to Reno really were the backbone of the Milne Empire. And I must say, in fairness, he did provide a fairly inexpensive package. In fact, I feel that's
one of his problems.
It was too inexpensive. But people did get their money's worth out of those trips.
Except that you'd go to expecting to be in some hotel and find yourself in a hotel of much lower quality.
Well, this would happen. That's hotel switching. I discovered that in some cases, these bus tours, and his tours to Reno initially were bus tours, what would happen is there would be overbooking. And he would not indicate before the buses left that the hotels people initially thought they would be in would be available, or would not be available, and they'd be going somewhere else. He wouldn't tell them until they were down there. And he says that in most cases they were upgraded. But in the 5% or so of the cases where they weren't upgraded, he would compensate them.
What's a casino drop?
Casino drop, Jack, is a reference in the tourist parlance to the value of your head as it walks in a door of a casino, which at the time that Stephen Milne was operating, it was $2 a head. And a casino would pay an operator $2 a head or for each person delivered to a casino. And that amounted to a substantial amount of money.
Selling cattle. Here are 100 mugs from British Columbia. Give me $200 for them, and I'll let them come in your door.
That's the principle, all right.
That's fantastic, because obviously the $2 live cattle from BC are going to spend $20 on the machines.
Well, the economics were definitely there, and it's interesting to note that those casino drops in the state of Nevada were almost classified as legal tender. They would assign them between casinos and recognize them as a part of their legal money.
Well, these tour operators must have picked up. I mean, when Milne was going good, he must have picked up a lot of this per capita.
$250,000 a year in his last year of operation.
In casino drops.
In casino drops.
That's quite fantastic.
Yeah.
But perhaps I was unfair in my opening remarks. I said, look, maybe to be sure you should just book through an airline. They give you packages too.
Yes.
Airlines aren't going to let you down on the deal, are they?
No, the airlines have gotten involved in the tour business as well. That always wasn't the case. And they are not necessarily registered under the Travel Agents Act in addition to that. But I think it gets to a complicated distinction between the airlines and the tour operators. In the Act, they're referred to as retailers as opposed to wholesalers.
Yeah, I know.
And
this is what, if I go to a travel agent and say, okay, I want a tour, right, and I'm going to so-and-so, does he buy that package from somebody else?
He can, or and say in the case of Milne, he'd provide it himself. So you can get the operators that do both. And this becomes extremely difficult to, for example, assess for purposes of the fund, because the Travel Assurance Fund is based primarily on non-scheduled transportation. So you get some very difficult situations.
There's nothing wrong with casino drops, is there? Or would you regard that as unethical or wrong for a tour operator to sell his BC bodies for $2 a head or $3 a head with inflation in Las Vegas or Reno?
I think certainly it isn't illegal. The ethics of it...
It's not illegal.
Not illegal, but the ethics of it I would leave to the travel industry itself. That's something that I wouldn't pass a comment on.
No, but you do recommend in your report that a code of ethics be established.
I do, and I think I was more concerned about hotel switching and things like that, although the brochures of, at least of Milne's brochures, provided that there was no guarantee that you would necessarily get the accommodation you contracted for. I can understand that, but to not tell somebody before they go down...
That they had been switched?
Yeah, I find that a question.
More with Fred Shandro on the fascinating business of the travel industry in British Columbia after the break. Well, I wonder if the public's happy with Mr. Shandro's recommendations, which include, correct me if I'm wrong, are you suggesting that they set up some kind of professional group which would have, for instance, the kind of self-disciplining powers of the legal profession?
Not to that degree, Jack. I am concerned that because I had seen things like hotel switching and price cutting, that there were matters that really were detrimental to the industry as a whole, which could result also in loss to the public, but they were not matters of legality. They were matters of behavior and ethics. And I felt, having reviewed the practices of some of the operators, like Milne, that if there were a code of ethics or a direction as to what the industry would frown upon in terms of price cutting and things like that, that it would make it a
good
happier marketplace. Yeah.
Now, so you recommend a minimum standard of competence of an applicant be established by the industry and the registrar. It seems to me that the public is protected just a little bit too much at times. Why couldn't these people, like used car dealers used to be, just be told, take out a bond or you don't get a license to do business?
Well, if it was just as simple as a bond, I think we wouldn't have the act, and it would be heaven on earth. But the situation is such that the travel industry, or the travel business, is unique. It's a prepaid service industry, which means you pay your money before you get your service.
They've got the money to use.
That's right. Now, it also is a high cash flow turnover type of industry, which means, in a period of 3 months, 2 months, there can be literally millions of dollars go through the hands. And the bonding situation would require, I think, an amount of money that would virtually not annihilate, but eliminate a good number of the,
I can understand
people
that.
in the industry.
If a guy's handling $2 million or $1 million worth of airline tickets, which he doesn't really own, for which he merely gets a small commission,
yes,
he can't use that to run his business. That just comes in and go out.
That's correct.
So the assessment into a fund. But how long is the fund efficient to the extent that if I have a bad complaint and I'm left stranded at Vancouver Airport or Tahiti Airport,
yes,
who's going to pay my fare back? Is that covered by this kind of thing?
Yes, it is. There is provision in the Travel Agents Act which allows the registrar to utilize funds from the Travel Assurance Fund to bring people back.
So that's a code of ethics be established. Increase the contributions by agents and package operators to the fund to bring it up to $1 million.
Yes.
$1.5 million, then you can look at it again, perhaps.
That's correct.
And some professional disciplining by the members of the others for breaches of a code of ethics.
Yes, there should be some direction as to standards of conduct.
But casino drops, the $2 a head bit fascinates me. Is that ethical or unethical?
I would hate to say. I'm not in the tour business.
I don't know. I mean, they're perhaps entitled for a commission for delivering the mugs to the casinos.
Yes. Maybe if people knew about it.
They knew about it.
Feel better about it.
Said, I want to go to a $1 drop casino instead of a $2 drop casino. Take some calls. We're not taking specific calls on Mills operation or any specific agency. But what do you think of this business? Oh, are you really aiming at regulation or deregulation of the travel industry?
Deregulation. I think throughout the report there are opportunities to impose bonds, as you suggested. You could require insurance. You can do lots of things which regulate. What I'm trying to do is take away from the legislation the complete control of the agent's operations, minimum interference.
Minimum interference. Standard of ethics, standard of competence.
Standard of competence. In general...
Do many of these firms go bankrupt, generically speaking? Is it a risky business?
As a business, no, I would say not. It's not any more risky than a lot of others, but as I've said, it's a prepaid service industry, so the impact on the public is much greater.
That's right. The politicians get screamed at.
That's right.
If somebody leaves 150 people stranded in Papeete.
Very high profile.
Go ahead, please. Yes.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this Jack Webster show?
Yes.
Can I speak to Mr. Shandro?
Oh, hold on a second. Yes, go ahead to Mr. Shandro right now, yes.
Thank you. Hello?
Turn down your radio this morning, your television, please, ma'am.
Okay.
You drive me into instant paranoia, which is never very far away anyway.
Okay.
Right, try it now.
Yes, I would like to ask Mr. Shandro, how come that people like Stephen Milne can continue to rip off the public?
Well, now, just a minute. Mr. Milne has been... Hold on a second. Mr. Milne has been dealt with in this matter. If you want to read the report, you'll find extensive investigations and conclusions about Mr. Milne's operation. And it's not a matter we can talk about right now, but hold on a second. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack.
That's me. Go ahead.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
Yeah, listen, I want to talk to you about these casino drops. The last time I was down, on the second day we were there, the bus driver says, I've got to take you over to Sparks, from Reno to Sparks, to a casino over there. I won't name the casino. But anyway, as we were going over, the bus driver says, now look he says, I am compelled to drop you off here. He says, now I would suggest you don't stay too long. He says, you can always walk through the front door and out the back door and catch a cab and get back to Reno. He says, this isn't a casino that's very well known to let the gambler get a bit of a break. And as we went into that casino, we each got $5 silver. And the biggest part of us walked right through and used that $5 to take a cab back to Reno. And that was the tip-off from the tour escort.
Did you hear that?
Yes, I did.
That's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
You go in and you outfox everybody by keeping your $5 silver.
Yeah. No, there's all sorts of permutations of what happens in those casino drops, but I did not investigate those as an item in itself.
Oh, no,
That's
but
just part of the...
It's a fascinating little
it is.
gimmick
Yeah,
of how you can
certainly is.
outfox it. Mind you, you might have a contract on you when you go back to Vancouver for your $5 silver. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm almost on the same point the previous gentleman was, but any casino you went in, you got quite $5 worth back per person, so I think you did better than a lot.
So you didn't object to it at all, ma'am?
Didn't worry me, and I traveled with Steve quite a lot. Quite a lot.
That's excellent, because it's not your intention to put small operators out of business.
Absolutely not. They provide, I think, an extremely valuable service.
Well, that's good. Go ahead, please. Hello. Hello.
Please hang up and try your call.
I think we'll have to have an investigation into my telephone system this morning. Are you prepared to take it on?
I need a rest.
Minimum standards of competence of the applicant here must be established forthwith. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Bonnie.
Mr. Shandro, I don't know if you've heard about time sharing in Hawaii. Hello?
Yes?
And I was just wondering what your point of view on the different types of time sharing they have in Hawaii to get away from Las Vegas for a bit.
No, that was not within the orbit of your
Certainly,
commission.
no, it wasn't.
Oh, time sharing is another interesting
Yes, it is, but I was
operation.
not involved in that at all.
Okay, Mr. Shandro, we'll just wrap it up by just going over some of your recommendations. One, it's not a bad industry.
No, I found it was to the contrary. For what it does and the money it handles, I think it's done a fairly
That's a good job.
Yes.
But there are some places where it could be tightened up
Yes.
for the public protection because it's a prepaid operation.
That's correct.
And one of those being the increase of the fund to $1 million, minimum standards of conduct, and a code of ethics.
Right.
Perhaps we should have a code of ethics for the people on the bus, too. Perhaps it's not fair for them to take the $5 silver, go out the back door, and go back to Reno in a cab.
That's a new story for me.
My thanks to Frederick W. Shandro for taking the time to come out and telling us about his investigation for Peter Heinemann. Oh, is Peter going to do any legislation on this?
They are presently working on all the recommendations, and I think in the spring we'll see something come.
My thanks to Peter Shandro. Next to Free for All with Webster after the break. Well, time for a little bit of free-for-all. And the first topic I want to cover myself for the moment are the elections last night for the president of the Pacific National Expedition. Pacific National what? Exhibition. And I want to give myself, most unusually, a little pat on the back. The winner last night was the indomitable, intrepid Erwin Swangard, securely in the saddle at the PNE as president of the board of directors. The loser was Bruce York, dear old Bruce York. And I predicted to Brucey's face yesterday that he would get 3 votes last night in his attempt to wrest control from the establishment, and I was dead on. He got 3 votes. That must make Bruce worry a little bit about his possibility of re-election in the December balloting in the city of Vancouver. And it'll make Harry Rankin even more nervous than he presently is about the future of Cope. I'm sorry about George Puel. I like George. You know, not many people do, but I like George Puel. And I'm sorry he didn't make it in as vice president last night. Anyway, that's point number 1. Point number 2. We got a phone call yesterday on the Cuthbert case. And here is my reporter, Steve Wyatt. Steve, the Cuthbert case, fill me in, is what?
Well, you remember he was on the show. Roy Cuthbert and the Ombudsman were on last fall.
On the show together?
That's right. And it was a case that started in 1968 where the BC Harbours Board wanted to expand the Roberts Bank Superport and expropriated 4,000 acres, including the Cuthbert property.
Half an acre in the wee house.
That's right, yeah. And they were the last people to hold out, and they're still holding out. They refused any money from the province.
He never took the money.
There's Roy and Maureen Cuthbert in their house there in South Delta. Now, they've been paying rent ever since the land was expropriated, but they haven't taken a cash settlement for their property. And they went to the Ombudsman in 1979, that's 11 years later, to try to keep their house because the Harbours Board decided not to go ahead with this expansion.
And the Ombudsman gave them a very favourable report and said the government should give the property back.
That's right, but then the Cabinet in turn, and Don Phillips especially, the minister responsible for the Harbours Board, said, no, we want to go ahead with the expropriation, and we want to settle this thing, give them a cash settlement.
Even though the Ombudsman's report was slipped into the House just before the Christmas adjournment.
That's right.
And there are plans for a motion on that in the House.
Well, it was submitted to the House in July, you remember, and then the next day it adjourned. So it really hasn't been debated in the House yet.
So what happened yesterday?
So the arbitration hearings went ahead, despite the Ombudsman's attempts to get it into the House. The arbitrator, in turn, Douglas McNeil is his name, has thrown it back in the lap of the minister. He's saying, I'm not going to deal with this until we clear it up in the government side.
Oh, it's a little bit of a stalling victory for the Cuthberts.
That's right.
And for their lawyer, what's his name again?
Chuck Johnson.
Chuck Johnston. In other words, the arbitrator yesterday said, hey, to Phillips, maybe you wanted to look at this again.
Well, he ordered a transcript of yesterday's hearing sent to Don Phillips to sort of remind him that there is an outlet within the Ombudsman's Act.
So this holds up Phillips and his steamroller.
That's right.
From going ahead instantly on this arbitration to take away the Cuthbert's wee house in its half acre.
That's right. Now, they don't even want to use this land for anything anymore. It's in the Agricultural Land Reserve again, so...
it's a question of government principle now.
That's right. They don't want to lose this land.
That's a step forward. So that's a 5-week delay. If they can stall it long enough to get the House back in session,
that's right.
I think Dennis Coker is going to put a motion on the order paper to achieve just, I don't know what's right and what's wrong in this case, but it seems silly.
Well, the house has been in this family since the late 19th century.
And it's just a little half acre on the road.
Oh, so just one house.
They can keep the other 3,999 and a half acres if they want to.
That's right.
The steamrollers of bureaucracy are beyond belief. What happened to that story we're going to do about this new private school in Vancouver Island? What's it called? Western Canada College.
Well, just before Christmas, we called the director, John Young, who may be familiar to some people.
Oh, John was a great controversial school teacher at Campbell River for many years. And a brilliant educator, I might say.
Yes. Anyway, he agreed that in the new year, we would go over and do a little profile of the new school. And again, yesterday, he agreed that we would go next week. But then, in turn, the directors apparently found out about it and put the brakes to the whole operation.
Oh, your reputation's preceding you. I was sorry. I spoke to John yesterday, and John said he'd like us to come over and do it. I just want to do it because I'm always intrigued by the establishment of these somewhat expensive private schools. Bring students in from overseas, charge them about $9,000
about
a year.
$9,000 a year, yeah.
Many students?
I can't remember. I think there's
79?
just about 75 or 79, something like that. Very small.
Yeah.
Maybe an old lodge, an old inn they took over.
Yeah, lovely old. I remember the old lodge at Shawnigan Lake. But John, when your directors get around to it, all we want to do is come and see your school, see who attends the school, how much they pay, and I'm sure the education is great. And I'm sorry your directors don't find Mr. Wyatt or Mr. Webster at this moment socially acceptable.
It's a
What
conspiracy.
else?
What else do we have?
Getting rid of some little bits and pieces this morning.
An
Mr.
interesting
Wyatt.
letter from Cassiar.
Cassiar.
Way up in northern BC, who wants, and they have the Cassiar Community Club, who have some very good athletes, want to compete in the Winter Games. Trouble is, the rules say, back to bureaucracy again, say that they have to compete in zone playoffs. Trouble is, they're as far as, well, 800 kilometers from one of their competitors, and if they don't play in the playoffs, in the zone playoffs, they can't play in the Winter Games.
Just a minute. This is from John Wong at Cassiar.
Community Club, that's right.
Oh. And because they're at Cassiar, and the nearest potential competitors are at Stewart, BC,
which is
537 kilometers, or Hazelton, 700 kilometers, they can't get a grant from the provincial government.
That's right.
To compete with. They're too isolated to take part.
And they're the largest community up there as well. And they have athletes who are gold medal winners in the northern BC Games, which, interestingly enough, they were invited there on an invitational basis to compete, and they apparently understood their peculiar situation.
Yeah.
And they want the same thing to happen at the Winter Games. But the organizers of the thing say, no, you have to compete in these zonal playoffs.
And they can't get the zonal playoffs because they...
Well, you know, they still go play on the weekends, and it's pretty far for them to go just for a weekend and compete and then get back to work on Monday again.
They want money, though.
Yeah, well, you know, they want some understanding, basically. They don't really need that much money because they have a sponsor in Cassiar Resources who helped them out in the northern BC Games as well.
And they're not allowed to play in the BC Games because they're too far away from people.
That's right. Well, they can't just get to their other communities within their zone to
Did
do
you
the
get hold of
playoffs.
this Ron Butlin at all?
No, we tried to reach
Who's
him.
Ron Butlin?
Well, he's the chairman of the BC Games Society, and we tried to contact him at his office in Victoria, but he's on his way back from trail. He's promised to get a hold of us this afternoon.
I just don't get it why they can't just go to.
Well, they have to compete and get in playoffs, just like the hockey playoffs. Same thing, basically. But they
they're
can't
not
get to these
allowed
communities.
to.
Well, not unless they compete in these playoffs first, in their own zone, in the northern region.
That's too bad. Well, we'll see what Butlin tells us about that.
What they want is to be invited to the games and compete in a few of the events.
What else have we got? 3 minutes to fill.
3 minutes.
Steve Wyatt will now look in the camera too and talk for 3 minutes.
Let me tell you a few secrets about Jack Webster.
In that case, I'll waken up and take some phone calls. Any phone calls? Any phone calls there? Have they got the television monitor sound down? My trouble is I've been too nice to people lately, you know that?
Not according to some of your mail.
Oh, I know, that's different. Why have we got no letters to put up this morning? No letters.
Well, it's New Year.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, I just wondered if in the future you were going to be doing a program on the Polish defectors.
What kind of program do you want in the Polish defectors?
Well, I just wondered, I got some information as far as what type of jobs they're getting once they get off the...
Well, tell me, I've had Ilya Jarol on the political aspects of the Polish defectors. My own opinions, I think, are fairly well known. I believe they should be given all kinds of moral support in Poland and all the rest of it. I just hope that they're all real defectors, not just skipping out in the wives and kids, some of them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I realize what kind of hard decision they must make to get off the ship in the first place. I'm unemployed myself, and some of these fellows are being placed into steel workers and construction industry, and I just wondered if what kind of...
Is that fair? Do you think that's fair?
I don't really think it's fair. I kind of wonder if a Canadian has to leave the country to get a job in that, you know.
Well, I can see that if I were out of work and I saw all kinds of people coming into the country and getting an edge to get jobs, I'd be pretty hostile about it myself, I'll tell you. But somebody must suffer in this imperfect society, and on this occasion, it's you.
Yes, I realize that.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, what I am, it's sort of against your program. They have this non-smoking. I'm trying to get my 14-year-old daughter to stop smoking, and here's a hospital man sitting there smoking all morning, and I see you taking a puff every once in a while. Also, that picture in the background, is a little bit too much.
You're smoking
Which
in that
one?
picture,
The one
too.
of you.
The new one?
Yes.
The fat one?
Yeah.
Take it down, Fred. Get it down right now.
Okay.
Just a minute, just a minute.
Program's wonderful.
Just a moment, please. Don't go away.
All right.
Will you send me a picture of you and I'll put it up? Yeah, away with that picture.
Well, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, this smoking business is driving me crazy. I've got to stop smoking after the break. I wonder if hypnosis would help.
I don't think so.
Eh?
When did you start? How old were you?
Oh, shut up.
How old are you
I'm
now?
not, no comment on that stuff. Tomorrow, the bad news on your school taxis with Weinstein and Bejan, BC School Trustees Association, 9 a.m. precisely.